No surprises on It's the Economy. We are going to talk tariffs. I just did a dipstick survey with Economists before I came into the show, and the impact of the 25% tariffs is seen as between 0.3 and 0.6% of GDP. But this doesn't include the penalty, since we don't know what the penalty is or whether 25% itself is the penalty. The problem in calculating impact is that part of the tariff usually gets passed on to consumers, part of it is borne by the exporter, and part of the hit is absorbed by the depreciation of the rupee. Look at the depreciation of the rupee over the past few days. Keeping these points in mind, let me invite our two experts to decode the impact of tariffs on both the macroeconomy and micro sectors. I have with me Ajay Srivastava, the founder of Global Trade Research Initiative, a Commerce Ministry executive himself in his previous avatar, and Abhishek Upadhyay, senior economist at ICICI Securities PD. Gentlemen, thank you very much indeed for your time. Abhishek, first the macro point. This is what I got, 0.3 to 0.6. Can you explain how we should think about the macro impact, given that we only know part of the hit, 25%?
The issue with estimating the macro impact, as you know, is we don't know how long these tariff rates are going to last, what will be the penalty. And as you mentioned, what part of it will be absorbed by the Indian exporter, the US importer, the US consumer. And then on top of, those assumptions, typically you apply, how elastic Indian exports will be once you have some color on how, high the US consumer prices are going to be. But making some heroic assumptions here, assuming at least the penalty part of these tariffs, where we have no clarity, and assuming that is temporary, and the effective rise in tariffs is, for India, somewhere between 20-25%, and roughly one third of that is absorbed by the US consumer in terms of higher prices. We assume maybe 30-40 basis points impact on growth from there. The reason we are not calling for a bigger impact, even this impact we have to see. This impact we'll only see if these tariffs stick for few quarters rather than few months. The reason we're not thinking bigger impact at this stage is two reasons. One, we have seen rupee already has underperformed other currencies. So while dollar has weakened more broadly, rupee has not appreciated in the same light. And on real basis, rupee has depreciated. Second, some of the competitors for India also are absorbing relatively higher tariffs. So the best case scenario, it appears, would have been 15% tariffs. We are stuck with 25% tariffs, excluding the penalty impact. And third, there's already been some front loading of exports to US. So if you see first 3 months of the fiscal year, April, June, exports to US have grown roughly 22% YOY. This compares with overall growth in goods exports of just about 2%. So already a lot of these exporters have front-run faring higher tariffs, and that provides some cushion, some time for us to see if negotiations work and tariffs come down. Therefore, we think, growth for this year, which we were thinking earlier, 6.3%, could still be closer to 6% rather than lower.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, actually, the last midnight soundbite that came out, I think it was a tweet, that came from President Trump looks particularly from a person who's irritated with not getting a deal. It didn't look very positive, so I don't know if there is a plus penalty or whether 25% is the penalty. Mr. Srivastava, what would be your initial reaction? Is it going to be a big hit? Or, as Abhishek says, rupee depreciation and passing on some prices will make it easy to suffer this?
So I take it as very normal process in the US. They were to announce new tariffs from August 1 on the countries with which they could not get the deal. So if not yesterday, the tariffs would have been announced on India, say tomorrow. So 26% was already expected. Penalty was, of course, the surprise element, and we have to yet to know what's the quantum and why. Is it because of Russian oil or BRICS membership or something else? So penalty amount will decide. And I personally see this as a pause in the negotiations. Negotiations have been continuing, and we heard that US team will be visiting India in the second week of August. And this is just a pause Trump, being Trump, he uses offensive languages and loses friends in the process. But I think they need deal with India desperately. And my guess, I could be totally wrong, but I still stick my neck out is that, India is willing to give them access to 95% of their exports to India. That is industrial goods. Agriculture accounts for less than 5%. Now, India, most of the agriculture is red line for India. Trump understands this dilemma of India that India cannot allow most of the agriculture. But suppose he does a deal with India today, then all other countries will be approaching Trump, please leave our agriculture. Right now, he could get Japan or European Union to sacrifice their agriculture. But suppose he does a deal with India today, then no other country will be committing to agriculture.
Okay.
Maybe that will be the reason for delaying this deal.
Fair enough. Yeah, fair enough. Maybe therefore he'll arrive at a deal with us last and after he has struck the agreements with others. But, Abhishek, you were calculating because of the hit taken by the Indian exporter and partially passed on to consumer, the hit will be probably about 0.3, 0.4, which is what most people are reasoning. Do we stand to gain because we don't have to buy expensive oil? We are free of other conditions. Would that be adding on a little bit, and therefore the hit to the macro may not be very much?
Well, concessions which other countries appear to be giving, the major ones include, investments in US, defense purchases, energy purchases, etc. It was likely that India would have had to make some of those concessions. I don't think there's a big negative impact if India, instead of buying oil from a different source, purchases some of this from US. Maybe the cost is higher, but I don't think that is a big drag. I think what we need to see here is now that US has started to impose secondary sanctions. A penalty is a sort of a secondary sanction for purchases from Russia. What impact this has on variables such as crude prices also. If crude prices increase, I would think that is, a separate hit that, we may get, on growth from there. So there are a number of moving parts here. At this stage, difficult to really consider the impact of those other moving parts.
Okay. What's your sense, Mr. Srivastava? Do we save precious dollars because we went to Russia because it is cheaper? Other than the strategic diversification of sources, do we save some money and not being forced to buy military equipment, which may not necessarily be our first choice or our best choice? Does that save us something?
So two, three things are there. Military equipment doesn't mean that suppose we buy planes, that's sufficient. No, we have to buy all the supporting structure. And we have committed a large amount of money for, say, Russian ground structure. Replacing ground structure of Russia with another country, I don't think we have any sufficient reason given by Mr. Trump, especially when America always stands with our enemies during our weak time, all the time. So I don't see. On oil front, Trump got Europe to commit that Europe will be stopping buying all the oil energy from Russia and buying everything from US. But if you see the US production, it's not sufficient to supply to European demand. Forget about the rest of the world. And he's getting other countries to get commitments to buy oil, every one of them, without even knowing what their capacity is. I think we need deeper understanding of these issues.
Yeah, I believe Morgan Stanley tried to make that calculation that if everyone actually acceded to US demand to buy crude from them, they will take up until 2027 to be able to supply all that crude. That's the rate at which their own crude production is increasing. So yes, there is a catch over there, but at the moment, the US president is not looking at actuality. He's only looking at scoring a point. Abhishek, what do you think will be the hit on the rupee? Should we be now prepared for 88 very easily? Today, the Reserve Bank is in the market. Any trader will tell you that. But eventually, it is to India's advantage to allow a depreciation. So have you changed your likely end-year rupee forecast?
So while CAD has not been a concern for India, overall BUP flows have been quite sluggish. And that is the reason rupee has underperformed other countries already. so far this year. This is a sentiment hit, and I mean we have seen some impact on rupee already. We are not changing BOP assumptions materially at this stage. We were already anticipating close to a neutral balance. Maybe we go slightly negative for this year because CAD could be a little higher with exports being hit. But yeah, on rupee, it also depends on how RBI views
Okay.
basically where RBI wants rupee to settle ultimately. They are big players in FX market. They have had a hands-off approach of late. Expect them to allow some more rupee weakness given downside risk to growth that we are already seeing. Even in a weak dollar environment, we are thinking rupee will be stable between 85, 86 dollar range. You're right. Maybe, it will settle towards the higher end of the past ranges and maybe 87, 88 dollar range in the near term before some of these losses are reversed, assuming dollar starts to weaken again as we expect.
Okay, actually, I'm completely out of time. I know that this is an enduring topic, and maybe by the time all of us meet again, we would be looking at a totally different set of tariffs and perhaps, hopefully, no penalties. Thank you very much for starting us to think on how to think about certain issues in terms of what can be passed on, what is the level of depreciation. Ajay, Srivastava, Abhishek, Upadhyay, thank you very much indeed for joining us. Wrap up on Bazaar on that note. Chartbusters coming up.